Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. I am one of your creepy co-hosts. I am Casey.
I'm Sam the Damned, and let's get screaming.
Let's get screaming, as today we are talking true crime. True crime is everywhere nowadays. Podcasts, movies, TV series, books, comic books, the list goes on. But have you ever heard the true crime story of Dorothea Puente, the killer grandma? Well, today you're going to learn about Dorothea because we are joined by the writer-director Chad Ferrin to chat about the true crime thriller Dorothea, a new release from Dread and Epic Pictures.
This true crime story follows Dorothea Puente, played by Susan Priver, who murders the residents of her own boarding house during the 1980s. Listeners, please join us in welcoming Chad Ferrin to the basement, talking his true crime follow-up to Pig Killer and Kemper, Dorothea. Chad, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, and I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, first things first, we got to start with this. You're a Midwest boy, just like both of us.
Yes.
We're from South Dakota, originally from both of us from Iowa. You are originally from Minnesota.
Yes.
How the hell do you go from being a Minnesota boy to working at Troma to now being a career director? How does that trajectory work?
Crazy. It started. My mother reminded me, because I've always had a love for cinema and films. I'd watch like 6 movies a day. I mean, I was always a film and TV junkie. And, at one point I'm like, you know what, I need to, make movies. And she's like, well, why don't you call up your babysitter when you were a little kid? Because she's married to a movie producer now. And I'm like, well, let's make this happen. So she called up Lori Leahy, who was, babysat me when I was a wee child. And she said, hey, my son is interested in making movies, and she's like, well, my husband, we're doing The Prophecy right now. If he wants to come out and be a production assistant, he's more than welcome to. So I hopped in my car and drove out, and that's history. I made a few films with them as a production assistant, then a camera intern, and, kind of learning the ins and outs of making a movies. That was my film school, and bless them for giving me the opportunity and taking me under their wing and showing me how it's done. And then I sold my house in 1998 to make my first film, Unspeakable, and I've been cranking them out ever since.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Like as people who have, Casey and I have both worked as PAs on different shoots and stuff like that, and it's like that's the best way to learn how to be a filmmaker is just to go be on a set. And it's
Totally.
so cool that that's just how you came up. You went and you did it. You got on a set and you worked your way up. That's great.
And it's a great thing as a production assistant, especially then you were kind of, treated as dirt. You were the bottom of the totem pole, and it kind of taught me, always treat others the same way you'd want to be treated. And so anyone's idea, whether it's a production assistant, a caterer, or the sound guy, or whoever it is, if they've got a good idea, I'll run with it, and feel welcome and open to be able to express those feelings. If the food is crap, say it. If the hours stink, bring that up, and we'll try to make it better, because it should be an enjoyable experience, not a drag to show up for work. Every day you should want to be there and have a smile on your face and be just excited to be making movies. And I try to bring that to everyone who I work with and who I want to work with, whether it's an actor or a crew member. Just have fun doing it and do the best you can, and you'll come up with something that sometimes surprises you how good it ends up turning out, just because you have a positive attitude, and everyone has a positive attitude on the set. It's infectious, and you can only make something that's not only makes you feel good that you did your best, but everyone else around you.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, one of my favorite things about one of my favorite things of talking to people about working on a movie set is the notion that even the worst day on a movie set is better than the best day doing literally anything else. And I think that holds true. And I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. Like, that's a testament to show you just fucking love movies.
Well, but I think, saying that, everyone, no matter what they do, whether it's shoveling pig shit or whatever it might be, do the best you can at doing that. And, and if you have a good attitude toward it, whether you want to be, Edgar Allan Poe, or you want to be whoever, or a musician, or whatever it is, you still should give 100% to everything and anything you do. And I try to do that, whether it's, I never intended to be a writer. I never intended to be an editor. I never intended to be these things, but I was forced through budget restraints to do them and learn them and do the best that I can at them. And like Dorothea is a perfect example. I had to become art department. So I production designed the whole thing, got all the props, got all, everything from is just to save money, because it's like, okay, look, if we hire a production designer, that's $5,000 right there. Then you got to pay him every day on the set. If I do it myself, order all the props on eBay and own them, it's basically $2,500. So you're able to save money, put it toward other things in the film, and at the same time, it's just, if you love the material and you love the work, it's not work. It's just doing what you love, and if it turns out good and the audience likes it, appreciates it, then that's even another score. There's nothing worse than, I've had numerous films where you do all this hard work and whatever, and the audience doesn't respond to it, and it does lousy, and then you're like, oh, it lost money. Then you have investors calling you up, where's my fucking, money? And it's like, I'm sorry, the movie didn't do well. Here's the invoice from the distributor. It only made $50 on Tubi. What do you want? So there's some do better than others and some don't, but at the same time you give the same energy and the same love to each one, hoping that the audience will like it as much as you did making it.
I love that. So these last few movies that you've done have been like very dark true crime stories, right? Like Dorothea is very much like a true crime story based on the killer grandma. When you're dealing with heavy subject matter like that, how do you does that affect the vibe on set at all, or do you not find that there's a push and pull with creating that positive energy while dealing with something so dark?
No, not on set. When writing the script, it's sometimes tough. I finished the Richard Ramirez script, which was really the hardest thing I've ever written, because that is one dark, evil son of a bitch. I mean, with Dorothea or even Ed Kemper, there are moments of things that you can relate to, whether it's, a messed up childhood with Ed Kemper, or, like when I was a teenager, I was into check forgery, and I got caught, and I did, 3 months in jail, and I learned never to commit crime again. But, I was fascinated by this dark thing. So I was kind of connected to her of ooh, that's exciting. She was into check forgery, flying, doing these things that I could personally relate to. Whereas, Richard Ramirez is, it's as dark as it gets and as hard as a subject matter to write. Whereas, Dorothea or even Ed Kemper, there was moments that I could relate to and write and work into it that made it a little more comfortable. As far as, on set, the murder scenes were kind of tough on certain things, with crew and whatever, but not anything that's, people running and hiding or quitting or whatever. Everyone was pretty game for it all.
I'm fascinated by what's.
I use usually the same crew and a lot of the same cast, so they know how I work, and they keep coming back for more, so they're having a good time, and there's kind of a shorthand with the actors or with the DP or any of these people that I've worked with before, and they kind of they know what they're in for, a 10-day shoot, limited resources, tight budget, and just doing the best we can, and knock on wood that they keep showing up for these shoots.
Did you just say this was shot in 10 days?
Yeah. This one was
Holy
actually 11.
shit, dude.
This was an 11-day. The Ed Kemper was 12-day. Pig Killer was 10-day. I mean, all of these are in, that range of time. A day or two extra sometimes.
Wow, that is insane, dude. That's awesome. I can't believe that. That's nuts. That is nuts for the shots you pull off in this movie and all the intricate camera work that you have. I love that. That's awesome. That's great. That's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You got to keep, if it works, keep doing it, and stick to that thing. Don't break the mold if it works for you.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's going to lead into my next question because I want to hear your answer to this because both Sam and I we watched Ed Kemper, we loved it. We interviewed Brink last year when that came out, and now this year with Dorothea. How do you describe the tone of your true crime movies? Like, how would you describe these? Because there's such a fascinating tone that I've been trying to pinpoint because it is dealing with heavy subject matter, but the way you shoot these movies has such a vibrant energy to them.
Yeah.
Like, how would you personally describe your take on a true crime story?
Well, I mean, for me, like this one was definitely more lighthearted than say Ed Kemper or even Pig Killer because I was able to kind of go that Goodfellas route with the talking to camera and the more because she's just such a vibrant character that you can't help but kind of root for her in a lot of this because she's an underdog, but yet she's poisoning people. So there's kind of this. It's a fine line of kind of finding if that works, and it just starts in the writing, and I just kind of go with how it feels for me, and if I'm entertained by it, and just kind of got to take what naysayers might say about the finished product and just kind of go with what you want to see. And, so far so good. I mean, a lot of these times, you're not sure how the audience is going to react, especially if it's a true crime and actual people did die in this situation, how they're going to react to it. If there is a comedic moment or if there is things, but you've got to remember, all these people were real people, whether it's Ed Kemper or Dorothea, they were real people. They took a shit, they watched TV, they read a book. And so they just happen to kill people. So for me, it's kind of finding what's relatable in this heinous person and try to make them that the audience can kind of connect to them in some way, shape, or form, and then able to at least go on this ride with them. And whether you're kind of offended by that or you're intrigued enough to go, well, look, I thought the movie stunk, but I'm interested in this Ed Kemper. And then you go and you read and you watch his interviews and you're like, oh, that's a whole other dimension the seed was brought from this one little movie that you hated or you loved or you whatever. So it kind of just opens your mind to other things. Being a true crime, it actually happened. There's real victims. You look up the victims. The Asian girl's mother was, worked here and this and that, there's so many different things. I live down the street from her or whatever it might be. That's really just a fascinating thing in true crime in general because, it happened in real places, real spots with real people, and your connection this day and age, 20, 30, 40, 10 years later, whatever it might be, that can connect you to it. It's just, and I think that's one of the things that's fascinating about true crime, or why people are fascinated by it, is because they can go to these places it happened, or they can look up the person or what car they drove, or they can feel a connection to things that are actually here and now instead of a fictional film.
Yeah. I love that.
Because for me, I love, if it's a period piece, going back and finding the cars, or wardrobe comes to me and say, hey, look, this shirt is from 1952. And you're kind of in a time machine of filmmaking where you're like, hey, we've just went from 2025 to now 1975. I mean, it's really kind of a neat thing on a nickel budget and on these things because people, said, look, we're going to go find this. Okay, eBay's got a tape recorder from 1970. Let's buy it. There's certain things that you kind of fill this little space in the middle of Burbank soundstage with things from the 1970s, and these actors are in character, and it's to me, that's the most exciting thing about doing true crime, is able to transport yourself to a different era as a filmmaker. And when the audience sees that and they're like, hey, well, at least it's got this, it's got that, it's got that, and you try to make something different from what might be a previous version of Night Stalker or Ed Kemper or whatever it is, and for me, it just keeps it exciting that I'm able to kind of do what we do on a limited budget, but trying to make it seem like, hey, I'm in 1974 or whatever it is with this killer, and bring the audience there to get a glimpse of what it might have felt like.
Yeah. I think both Kemper and this one are tremendous as far as like the setting that they're set, like you feel like you are transported back. Like your period piece aesthetic is so good in both of these. And like your narrative structure in this is a little different too. Like you have Dorothea breaking the fourth wall. You have this framing device where she's, dying in prison and she's telling her story. How do you go about finding like those cinematic ends to make it like, you're making a movie about this. You have to make it cinematic. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's just, my love of cinema and my love of like film noir or whatever it might be, where, voiceover and narration were, in a constant. And, it's one of those things, like my favorite Blade Runner is the one with, their narration. There's certain things, because it reminds me of a film noir or films that really inspired me as a kid or whatever it might be, or going, shooting a color film, but then having a black and white flashback, or certain things like that are exciting, for me cinematically, that remind me of things that, I might have seen, an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents when I was 8 years old on a 13-inch TV, but it's stuck in my mind. And then it brings me back to that moment of being this little kid. And then you hit the smells of whatever it were. There's so many things in the mind that are unlocked by things that have happened. I had a deja vu moment the other day when we just locked picture on another true crime film, and it just hit me. And then I'm like, God, I had this phone call and it felt like I had it 20 years ago. Deja vu things that are just, that's so creepy that you start thinking of all this happened, a century ago or whatever. And there's so many different things that you can connect to. And I think that's the amazing thing with cinema. And for me is, you remember the certain smells of, when I saw the Night of the Living Dead remake, the Tom Savini film. I was in a United Artists Theater in the front row, and I forgot my wallet when I left, and I had to go back, and then it started raining. I remember these things vividly. That it's amazing that a movie can do that, and not many things have that. So for me, it's to be able to try to get that same feeling in the audience that I had on these great films that made an impact on me is something that I strive for, and I hope in some people it is achieved. That's there's no better thing than that. And it's, again, just being true to not only the story and what happened. It's also, making it cinematic. Like you said, there's certain things, and Dorothea really had that direction to go because she was just such, again, a colorful character with numerous characters that she dealt with, and and with the music and with the the different things that you could do to kind of bring that to life was an exciting challenge, especially in a limited time frame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned earlier is the cast that you have in this and the crew that you have working on this, because you work with a lot of the same people: Susan, Brink, Lou Temple, Ginger Lynn, Joe
Sure.
Castro does the special effects and gets a role here. What's it like working with this crew that you've developed on these last couple films, and maybe creating a shorthand on set because you've worked with them so often?
Oh, totally. It's there's such a joy to be around, and you just call them up and say, "Hey, are you interested in doing it?" And they're like, "Of course." And then you get there, and it's just like being back a family reunion, and everyone's excited, and they give 100%. It's like all I got to do is sit back, yell, action and cut, and that was a print. It's great, perfect. Move on. Whereas sometimes, or you'll find a new actor, like on this film we just did, Sunset Strip Killers, this guy Max Williams, who was fantastic. Really nailed it. Camera loved him. Great attitude, great everything. And you meet someone who you'd not worked with before, and they auditioned and they nailed it. And then you bring them in, and they're not only a great actor, but they're a great person and a good energy and whatever. And then everyone is kind of like, hey, this guy's good. Use him again and again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. So fun fact about this show, Joe Castro was one of the first guests we ever brought on for an interview. And we just love when his work pops up in stuff that we're watching for this show. Because he's just such a gifted special effects artist. One effect that I really have to bring up. It was from the first kill. I called it the fountainhead effect, where it's the head on the back of the bathtub and it's just geysering blood out the eyes, the mouth, the ears, and it's just running. Like, it's such a cool shot. It's so, like, where did that come from? And I loved it. I thought it was great.
No, that's one of those things of, being inspired by, film noir or whatever, and you kind of think of this old time of how would this girl kill her, her husband in the bath, make it seem like an accident, and then you're like, oh, the sink. I mean, and then it comes out, and then you pitch it to Joe, and it's like he comes up with, oh, we can have the water come out the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and and then when he does it, and you're there, and it works, it's like, oh, Joe, you can't outdo him. I mean, he really is not only great at his job, but he has just such an energy and an excitement for being there and for doing it and pulling it off that is, it's amazing. And, it's just always a pleasure to work with him.
Yeah.
Every time we have heard or had his name mentioned during an interview or a movie we're talking about, it's always someone pitches him this idea and then it goes 10 times bigger because he can actually pull it off 10 times bigger on a budget, which is insane for a special effects artist to do.
Right. Yeah. No, because most of the time, you'll whatever, and then it'll never work, or it will work half-ass, or when you ended up paying, half your budget to do it. But every time it's like, Joe, here's how much we got. Here's what I can do this, and it's bigger and it's better, and and he pulls it off. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Another name and note we got to bring up here is Richard Band, who did the score for the film. Can you kind of walk us through that and getting, Richard Band on the project, and, something that I think is often missed in, lower budget, smaller budget movies is a great score, and Richard Band is arguably the king of giving great scores to smaller budget movies. Can you kind of walk us through getting Richard Band on projects?
Oh, I mean, Richard is just phenomenal. And it was I'd first worked with him on Exorcism at 60,000 feet, and he was just amazing to work with. But we had some money to pay him, and, everything was fine. And then, a couple of years down the road, I approached him to do, the score for the Deep Ones, because it was a Lovecraft film. And I'm like, you can't do a Lovecraft film without a Richard Band score. So, but I'm like, look, we've got a fraction of the money, and send me the script, and he liked the script, and then points on the back end, whatever it might be to make it work. And he did it, and that kind of just keep letting on to, I'll do a film like Ed Kemper, send him the script, he likes the idea, it starts cooking in his mind, he'll visit the set when we're shooting, likes it, and then I send him a rough cut, and he kind of goes from there, and I'll come over and he says, here are my ideas, here's where some music should go, and we sit down, talk about it, smoke a couple cigarettes, and then a month later he says, here's your score, and it's magical, and on this one, it was, I usually put in a temp music for every score when I'm editing. And this one I used nothing but Ennio Morricone. And it fit really well, and it was great. And normally I'll send it to Richard, and he'll shit all over it and say, you shouldn't have used this temp score. It's not any good. But this time he's like, oh my God, this Morricone music fits it beautifully. And he was greatly inspired by it. So there's even some tracks that are very, when they're carrying the coffin down to the river, the womp, womp, womp. That's totally, an Ennio Morricone score, and that inspired Richard to go that direction. And he had a blast with it. And it's one of, my favorite score of all the films he's done for me. It hands down, it really has its own personality, and it's really special.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a testament to all of the work that you've done, especially, now with Dorothea being out there, is, again, assembling a crew that frankly knows what the fuck they're doing to get this movie done and out there and as professional as possible. And you guys, you guys knock it out of the park every time you get together with your team here. So,
well, I mean, look, that's the other thing, and I hate to say it because it may sound like. I take the commercial side and the artistic side and all those things in the same exact thing. None is better than the other. When someone tells me, hey, I just spent $400,000 on this movie, and I'm like, you're never going to make that back, man. Who the fuck cares? It's got to be, a certain thing. Sure, if you've got names in it, if you've got this and it fits that, maybe if Netflix buys it, you'll make that back. But you've got to be pragmatic and realistic about what these things are worth and whoever is going to see them. And, the last two Lovecraft Lovecraft films I did bombed horribly. They were fucking awful. I mean, I've got the investors calling me, death threats, and you got to stop and think, well, I'm not going to do a fucking Lovecraft film again, no matter how much my heart may pound for it, because if the audience isn't there to watch it or to buy it, and the distributor's not, making money, and then money's not coming to me or to the investors, it was a complete and utter failure. I don't give a shit how good the reviews are or how good the rating on IMDb. None of that fucking shit matters if you're getting death threats, I'm telling you. So it was one for me. True crime, is doing really well. And it's like, for Ed Kemper, I just had to show the distributor the stills that we shot, and they're like, okay, we're going to buy this, before it's even done. And so that was a no-brainer. Dorothea, they basically bought it from the script. So it was kind of one of those things that I'm like, this true crime shit is the way to go. So if you can make it, and you're excited by making it, which I am, and it's still interesting and exciting, and it's working for the distributor, and people are seeing it and they're receptive to it, then it's a no-brainer to keep doing it. Whereas, other stuff that I've done where it's like, okay, man, my heart's really in this. I love it. The Lovecraft stuff I love. And, it was a passion project. And when it fails, you're heartbroken. But at the same time, you put up your pants and you go on and make another one, and don't let it get you down. Because, it's the same thing as a good review or a bad review. I don't give a shit either way. Because, one person's going to love it. One person's going to hate it. Which is better? They're all out there. So I just kind of take it on the skin of my, let it roll off my back and just keep doing it. And it's, I've got 3 other films cooking. So if they hate Dorothea, I've got Sunset Strip Killers, I've got Richard Ramirez, and I've got another one that's just, came down the pike. So I don't let, whether it's a good received film or a negative received film, I don't let it affect me in any way. I hope the best for it, but I've got to move on and disconnect myself from it, or I would have killed myself long ago from negative reactions.
So you've got 3 more movies in the books, one about Richard Ramirez. Like, is there, both Kemper and Dorothea are kind of lesser known true crime stories, right? Like, they're a little bit under the radar. Do you want to keep going further into the well-known stuff, or are there more wow, people don't know about this thing that happened that you'd like to tackle in the future?
Yeah, well, I think the Sunset Strip Killers was Carol Bundy and Doug Clark, which in 1980 they kind of hooked up and fell in love, and then started killing a whole bunch of prostitutes, and had kind of this 9.5 weeks true crime vibe. And it was written by Chuck Perrello, who directed Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer 2, Ed Gein, and Hillside Strangler. And the script was great and the timing was right, and that one came out. But again, more of an unknown duo of serial killers that was a joy and a blast to make, and had a completely different energy and vibe than Dorothea and Ed Kemper. And this was after I had finished and Night Stalker had been greenlit, because Night Stalker was the toughest thing I've ever written, and it's the nastiest, most vile film that will ever be made. It's basically a 120-minute snuff film. I mean, it is fucked up. It's basically Lucio Fulci doing true crime, is my vision of making this. And the distributor is like, you need to tone this down. I'm like, well, I don't want to fucking make it then, because the toned down version was made as a TV movie in 1989 or whatever, and it's actually pretty damn good and really follows the way it is. I don't want to copy that. I don't want to, play with the victims and hold their hands. If I want to make a Richard Ramirez movie, the audience is getting in the seat with Richard Ramirez, stealing a car and going to someone's house, breaking in, shooting the husband 3 times in the fucking head, and raping the hell out of the wife. The audience is going to be right there with them doing this. And if you're going to puke your guts out, because that's how it happened, and it's terrifying. And that's the Richard Ramirez I want to make. And I'm not saying it's glorifying him. I'm not saying I want to be, show the audience this is what fucking happened, and it's disturbing as all hell. The writing that script gave me nightmares. It made me nauseous, and I've seen some crappy, nasty, horrible stuff in my life. I grew up on a fucking farm. I've killed animals. I mean, there's things that, in that script, and the stuff he did is just gut-wrenching. And
Yeah.
it's like, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it so it's fucking gut wrenching. And, and hats off to, Patrick at, Dread, who's like, if do it,
Yeah.
You're already giving me nightmares, because that's the
Yeah.
only serial killer that I've legit like stayed up at night thinking about. So
Yeah.
I am tentatively optimistic to watch this movie, knowing I'm going to be terrified and scarred and probably be kept up at night. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, we'll have our barf bags ready when we watch it.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, with that. So, Chad, we got one last question to leave you off with here. So, if people are going to watch Dorothea, what movie would you pair with it for a double feature? If you're having a movie night, you're having some people over, popping some popcorn, pop on Dorothea. What's a movie you're going to show right after it for a double feature?
I think, anything by Robert Aldrich, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Those are films that really inspired me for this kind of a grand guignol, just the older woman, Betty Davis or, Joan Crawford. I mean, just there's something about those two that is just so magical. and it definitely inspired me for Dorothea. So I think those would be a good pairing.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Love that. Well, hopefully everyone can go watch this movie November 4th out on digital then and do that double feature. And Chad, we'll have to have you back to help us get over the trauma that will be Richard Ramirez.
I can't wait.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us. Anything else you want to plug and throw out there?
No, I mean, hey, I just hope the audience digs it and, review it, talk about it, tell your friends I hated it or loved it. I mean, as long as people are talking about it, I'm happy. And, it's just one of those things that the love for not only true crime, but horror films or films in general is just an amazing thing, especially this time of year with Halloween. It's like every time you flip on the TV, there's a horror movie playing or whatever. It's just a good thing. And the fact that Dread put it out on, the little theatrical run on Halloween is touching to me beyond words. So I'm just excited that it's going to get out there, and I hope that it finds an audience.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal: providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.